Let's talk. Talk about the things that mean so much to you and me. Let's talk.
And here's your host, Henry Benefield.
Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting program of Let's Talk. Of course, as you heard, I am your host, Henry Benefield. Not that I need to say that again. As usual, we start out every program with appreciations and thank yous and accolades to you, our public, for making our program a success. We thank you so much for watching and getting all the information that we try to bring to you as people in the tri-state area. Today, we're going to continue in that realm of providing information for you. In March, there are some preliminaries that are going to be coming up on March the 17th, and we're talking about positions that are going to be opening up in Hamilton County, positions such as a prosecutor, Hamilton County prosecutor. We have a gentleman that's going to be running for that position. Just wanted you to get a chance to meet him and introduce himself to you, and you can find out all the information of what he's going to be standing for as he gets the position of Hamilton County prosecutor. And then later on in the program, we have a young lady that is going to be having a position as well that's running at Hamilton County, which is the juvenile judge. And so hopefully you'll get a chance to listen and make a decision whether you would like to vote for this person or not. That is our job, to bring a lot of folks to you so you can get a perspective of what they stand for. So let me welcome my very, very first guest. He is a resident of Cincinnati, Ohio. We've known him a while, and we're very honored to have him on the program. He is running for the position of Hamilton County prosecutor. Please welcome to Let's Talk, Mr. Fanon Rucker. Hey, man, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure to have you, brother.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation. This is awesome.
Hey, man, listen, great. One of the things, let me thank you for accepting the invitation to come, because what happens is a lot of times people see folks on ballots and they try to figure out, well, who is this? What is this person about? I mean, should I vote for them? And sometimes people go on the promise that folks are going to vote for them just because they're named. Yeah. You know, when you really don't know whether they're going to do a good job or not. So let's just start off. First of all, man, again, I've already said welcome. You have a phenomenal history in the city of Cincinnati, working with the Hamilton County itself. And before we get to all the credits and things, let's talk about who is Fanon Rucker, so that we really kind of know the guy. You know, I know you were born in Cincinnati.
No.
You were not born in
Cincinnati. I was not born in Cincinnati.
So tell us where you were born, some of the things that you were that influenced you to make you want to run for the position of the prosecutor, excuse me.
Well, I was born in Gary, Indiana.
Okay.
Born and raised in Gary, Indiana.
Uh-huh.
And Gary is rough.
Yes.
Home is a challenge. And there are some people who I've talked to since then, whether they went away in the military or they ended up going to school someplace else. And we have this conversation that we made it out.
Okay.
And I was fortunate. When I was in high school, my high school guidance counselor, who I don't think she meant anything malicious by it, but she looked at the statistics in her book and she said, here's a young black male whose grades ain't that great.
Wow.
Who grew up in a rough neighborhood and had a different kind of upbringing. He probably won't be successful. So when I told her of my intentions to go to college,
Sure.
That was what she told me. She said, you shouldn't waste your time going to college.
Wow.
You probably won't be successful. Those
Wow.
are her exact words. This is my guidance counselor. This is the person who's supposed to be telling me how high I could rise,
Absolutely.
how there are no limitations to my
Absolutely.
future.
Absolutely.
She was telling me what the limitations that I was facing.
Wow.
Fortunately, I had more people pouring into my life than I had people who were telling me what I could not do.
Yeah.
And so I didn't listen. I ended up going to Hampton University on a very competitive admissions policy, graduating from Hampton and deciding when I was in Hampton that I wanted to be a lawyer. Now, the law was not something that I went to school to. Psychologist, he's Rastafari. He gave me my first Bible when I was graduating from high school.
Wow.
My first engraved Bible. And he's a very big influence on my life. And so as I'm in college, that's what I was studying, was psychology. Well, then in 1992, it was after I pledged my fraternity, I'm standing around, I was part of a group And they talked about how the Constitution did not really intend to apply to folks that look like us.
Wow.
And if 2/3 of if 2/3 of the people in D.C. decided that we should be slaves again, all they had to do was raise their hands, we could be slaves. And that impressed me. Now, at 48, I know that it's not quite that easy.
Sure.
But at 19, it was enough to motivate me to say, I want to be part of the group that could keep that from happening. Well, at that same time, there was a guy in California. He was a big guy in a small Hyundai. And he's driving, and the police were chasing him, the LA police, and he wouldn't stop. So when they finally got him stopped, they surrounded him, and they assaulted him. 56 hits of baton, they kicked him and beat him. And we in the community, we in the world saw it happen.
Finally.
Because someone across the street had a video camera.
Wow.
There have been cries all along for generations that these people were being abused.
Wow.
And the communities were being overly forced, or there was too much force being used in our communities. We've been hearing this for years. But now we actually had the evidence that proved it to be true.
Wow.
Well, then we know that those officers were charged, and because of legal maneuvering, they were acquitted. There was not guilties for all of the officers involved, even though we had the video. And our country erupted. This was in the spring of 1992.
Yeah.
And so I, as a 19, 20-year-old college student, I'm seeing this, and I said, I want to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And I don't just want to be a lawyer. I want to be a civil rights lawyer. I want to
Wow.
be someone who protects people's rights, who explains people's rights, and who can actually help others in a massive way.
Sure.
That was the flashbulb thing in our history that motivated me to want to become a lawyer, and particularly a civil rights lawyer.
Wow. Wow, how awesome. So I know you grew up in Indiana, and you said that a lot of people influenced you to get a higher education. What would you really say? Because I think it's important for other folks, because we know that you're running now for the position in Hamilton County. Other young folks that would possibly say, well, there isn't any hope for me, but there was a pinnacle in your life where you decided that what this person said to you was not going to be a reality. And I know, being a brother and an African-American man, same thing, how important it is for us not only to encourage just African-American youth, but youth, period. Yeah. When people put a negative in your life, you can't be this, you're never going to be anything. What would you say to a young person listening to today's program in reference to receiving negative comments about you're not going to be something, but yet you were determined to?
So one of the things that I love to do, I do a lot of public speaking.
Okay.
I speak to a lot of community groups, youth groups, church groups, fraternal groups, motivational speaking. Sometimes I talk about history, sometimes I talk about legal issues. But one of the things that I tell young folks all the time is that I am a living testament. That just because somebody tells you what you're going to be doesn't have anything to do with what you're going to be.
Sure.
The ceiling that people place over your life is not the limitation that you have to accept.
Yeah.
That self-fulfilling prophecy that we talk about, where people say you're not going to. A lot of times, I've heard of a lot of successful people. In fact, my pastor even mentioned that the same thing happened to him, that a counselor in his life told him he shouldn't do this or he can't do that. And what I've heard from a lot of successful people is that deterring word actually became a motivator for them to prove people wrong.
Sure.
So over the years, I've told people, let people tell you what you can't do.
Yeah.
And then prove that they're not correct.
That's wind in your sails.
That's right.
Wow.
And that's what I would tell any young folks. Don't let what somebody else has as a design for your life be the design for your life.
Wow.
It's not what's out here, it's what's in here.
Wow, yeah. And understanding too that's why it's important to have or get something in here to work off of. Otherwise, you'll be in the general status of saying, well, I'm not this, I'm never going to be this. You believe all of the negative energy that people try to put on you.
That's right.
And
I talk about that a lot with the balance. So I got that on one end, but in my other ear, I had a lot of people who were saying, here, this is what you can do. They would give me examples of what I could do. I look at it in terms of music today.
Wow.
There's a lot of messaging in our music that is misogynistic,
Sure.
it's violent,
Sure.
it's demeaning.
Sure.
And, I kind of like some of the music, just because of the music, the beats and stuff.
I'm praying for you.
But I also have
yes, I do as well.
But see, I have a couple of degrees.
Sure.
And I got a job.
Yes.
And I got a house.
Sure.
If I'm 13 or 14 or 15 years old, and those are the constant messages I'm receiving without the balance of the other messages.
Yeah.
Because we got those messages when I was growing up, but I also had the counterbalance
Wow.
of church And I had the counterbalance of mentors. And I had the counterbalance of going to the museums in Chicago on Saturday and Sunday. And I had to, as long as there's balance, you have to be careful what we allow our children or what we consume ourselves.
Right.
There has to be equity. There has to be balance. The messages have to be there.
And I agree. One of the things that we talk about on Let's Talk, we've had a multitude of guests to come, and one of the things that I've had a real strong opinion on is our input in the folks that we're connected to, whether the young people. I'm finding that society, which is us, is becoming very passive with anything. You know, there were I was recently in Chicago, Illinois, at one of my family members' birthday party, and the song that they put on was, it had the B word in it. And I'm thinking, this is a college educated person, and happy birthday, and they used the B word, this is the birthday, and I'm like, you know, of course, I'm older, and you don't want to be, you know what I mean, judgmental. Yep. But I'm thinking, wait a minute, we have diminished, and it was a young African-American artist.
Okay.
And I'm not getting off focus. I'm really bringing the point of how all of this positive input from your surrounding people helped to launch you into where you are today.
That's right.
From just, if it was an aunt, a cousin, a brother, or somebody, you got somebody, Miss Johnson over there in the nurses board or something like that.
The candy lady on the block.
Yeah, yes, somebody interjected something rather than being so passive, because you can't just sit and wait for things to happen but are not willing to do anything to make it happen.
That's right.
You know, so how important it is, and how encouraging for me to know that if I stand up and say something like I was telling the person that I went to the birthday party, is it acceptable for us to use you in a term of a B?
Right.
And they were like, oh, it's just a record. And I said, yeah, but you were saying that this is cool. You wanted to dance to it's funny. Now, if that's acceptable at your party, why wouldn't it be acceptable in your home?
That's right.
Or wouldn't it be acceptable on your job?
That's right.
If it's unacceptable, it's unacceptable, period.
Correct.
So,
correct.
you know, everybody.
Oh yeah, we could have. Yeah, no doubt.
You know. So anyway, tell us a little bit more about Mr. Rucker. I'm telling you, I'm excited to know that you have decided to run for the position, and knowing the character of the individual certainly makes it a lot easier to make a choice. Yeah.
Well, can I say that I don't make any professional moves? I'm actually retired from the bench after 12 years, what would probably have been a guaranteed position.
Sure.
And I don't make any professional moves of that magnitude without prayer, meditation, and hearing a clear voice.
Absolutely.
That's the only way I move.
Wow.
And that's what I did here. I got it. It was clear.
Sure.
And I said, I hear it.
Now, you alluded to the fact that you were on the bench. Let's tell folks that some of your history is you were.
I was a prosecutor for the first part of my career. When I graduated from law school, I had clerked for a couple of federal judges while I was in law school. Started off as a prosecutor for 5 years. After I left the prosecutor's office, I joined a law firm of about 15 people where I was able to do that civil rights stuff that I had wanted to go to law school for in the first place. And so I was a civil rights lawyer.
Under a recognizable name, of course.
Manley Burke in Lipton was the first firm I was at, and I was able to practice civil rights and litigation. I was a trial lawyer. I did employment discrimination. I did housing discrimination. I mean, I was 30 years old, and I was trying federal class action lawsuits, and you know, and helping to protect people's rights and helping them to get compensation for having their rights been violated. I mean, it was exciting. I was doing national stuff and TV and radio, and I was doing leadership in the community, in the law, legal organizations, and trustee of the Bar Association, all that kind of stuff. Sure. I did that for a few years at that firm, and then I joined a larger firm down on 4th Street. So I wasn't a Brooks brother, but I was close to. I was on the 4th Street and on the 37th floor, and I'm looking out over the river and the stadiums, and I practiced, and I continued to be a trial attorney, but I started representing small family-owned businesses, as well as still having a very active civil rights and employment discrimination practice. Also became the law director for Lincoln Heights, where I wrote all the laws, and I represented the city manager and the police chief and the city council members. And then in 2004, I was 32 years old. I had been, doing these different things around the county, and there was a scandal in the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor who was then in office got into a situation with one of his subordinates, and it was exposed. And there was nobody on the ballot because there had been a belief around here that these offices could not be challenged. Because for a long time, this was a very one-sided county politically. And so no one was running.
Which is a known fact.
That's right. But that has changed to the most incredible degree over the past 15 years. So, but I ran. I ran, and we got that individual to resign. He stepped down, and so I was running as a write-in, and the current prosecutor came back. He was the treasurer of the state at the time, and he ran as a write-in. So it was the first time in the history of Hamilton County that such a powerful position was decided purely on a write-in vote.
Wow.
We got 95,000 write-in votes. 95,000 after just 7 weeks of running at 32 years old, having never run before.
Sure.
Raised $150,000 in just 7 weeks. Outraised the incumbent state officer who came back to run. Got the endorsement of the largest paper in the county. Got the endorsement of the smallest paper in the county. I mean, it was incredible. And that was my birth of politics. That was the first time I was really heavily into politics. First time I ran for office. Didn't quite make the mark, but we impressed a lot of folks.
Certainly.
And got on the radar. And that was not only a political journey, but for me personally, it was a spiritual journey.
Wow.
Where God confirmed himself for me at every turn. And he also then later said, see, I know that you didn't get the outcome that you thought, but if it had not been for that race, you would not have been able to serve as 12 years on the bench, and you would not be in a position today to run this race that you're running.
Wow.
So after 2004, wasn't successful, continued to have a very active practice, very public practice, and then in 2007, Governor Ted Strickland appointed me to the bench. I was 35 years old, youngest judge on the bench in the state of Ohio, and I was focused on the reason I went to law school, and that was to make sure that our system was as responsive as it could be to the people who had to have some contact with the system.
Sure.
As I said, I do a lot of speaking. One of the things I tell a lot of people is the best way to deal with the system is to never get involved with the system.
Absolutely.
Because that's a place that deals in anonymity. It doesn't look at people as individuals. It looks at people as numbers. It looks as faceless.
Wow.
The individuals who run the system, that's how they have to do. Because if you start getting individual stories, you start caring too much.
Wow.
And if you care too much, you may actually make decisions that are actually responsive and helping people to be better than they were before they came before the court. I was okay with that.
Wow.
Because that was, I don't know, my mission. That was my objective. That was my goal.
Sure.
And it was every day. I never had a bad day on the bench. I didn't. I loved every day. And I was very fortunate to have made relationships with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and other judges around the state so that they elected me as an officer of our State Judges Association, which of course was a very exclusive position for folks that look like us.
Sure.
It's not very common. I also was appointed by the Chief Justice to various committees where I helped to write the laws that govern our courts. I was appointed as a bar examiner, meaning I'm the one who writes the questions for people to become lawyers and who helps to set the rules. This is all before I stepped down.
Wow.
And so when I stepped down from the bench, when I retired in September, it was while I was at that peak. Wrote more decisions than anybody down on the bench, presided over a couple 100,000 cases in those 12 years, had the respect of my peers, had the respect of the community. And this race popped up for prosecutor. I always had my eye on it. In 2008, nobody ran against him. In 2012, one of my mentees, Janaea Trotter, who just I was able to help to endorse her and support her in taking the seat that I retired from. 2016, my best friend, Judge Alan Triggs now, ran for the seat. And every time I'm like, ooh, wish I could. 2020, I didn't have to wish I could.
Wow.
I prayed, I meditated, and I said, I can.
Wow. Wow, how awesome. And let's just make it official again so everybody knows. Introduce it one more time and almost like a public address. My name is so-and-so, and I am running for...
My name is Fanon A. Rucker, retired judge, and I am a candidate for Hamilton County prosecutor.
Wow, how awesome, how awesome. Let's talk about one of the things we noticed that in the past there's been a lot of issues concerning people, liking certain people in elected offices. And one of the things that I've always said, if you want to make a difference in that office, vote.
That's right.
Without your vote, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, there are some primaries coming up.
That's right.
So let's talk about that a little bit so people have
Sure.
information in order to vote for Mr. Rucker for prosecutor. Here's a couple of things you need to do.
All right. So March 17th is the first step in the prosecutor's office. And there's a lot of stuff we can talk about with the prosecutor's office and the impact of that position and the power of it. But March 17th is the first step. That's a primary. There is a primary in this election. And so March 17th will be the first step for getting through to November. And then November, I believe it's 7th. I'm focused on March 17th right now. And after March 17th, we'll be focused on actually winning the office and making all these changes that will, I get excited and passionate about what we're able to do when that prosecutor's office actually changes leadership.
Sure.
But I implore everybody, when it comes to voting, and about 5 years ago, I helped to design a candidate engagement program started by the NAACP and Prince Hall Masons. We do this every year. We do it twice a year normally, and we bring in candidates, all political philosophies, anyone who's running for office, and we have these candidate forums, and we pack the house with these. And it's sponsored by non-political groups, apolitical groups, for the opportunity to hear from those who are asking for the power of our vote. Yes. And I tell folks every year, our vote is powerful. How do we know? First of all, because people keep trying to take it from us.
Wow.
And second of all, we know that if I don't go vote and somebody else does, then I am giving away my ability to decide who is leading me.
Say that again.
If I do not vote and someone does, then I am giving away my ability to decide who I want to make decisions on my behalf.
And not that you are ignorant, but say it one more time for the record. One more time because I think people do not really realize the validity of the statement you just made. One more time for my public, please. Sure. If I what?
If I do not vote, then somebody else goes vote. They are making a decision for me, and that is giving away my power.
Wow. Wow.
My vote is extremely powerful.
Exactly.
I encourage everybody not to give your power to somebody else. Exercise it. Do your research. Don't just vote. Take some folks with you.
Sure.
Because what I've noticed, and again, I've been in elected office for 12 years, but watched it before then, community-wide, if there's large swaths of the community, like if there's a large group of young folks, or if we're talking about Hispanic voters, or if we're talking about women voters, if there's large groups of individuals that are identified that do not participate, let's just say black voters, then the people who get elected are not responsive to those groups.
Sure.
They don't feel an obligation to.
Exactly.
Now, if there's certain communities do, so for example, Bond Hill and Roselawn, 7J, those are high voting precincts in the city of Cincinnati. And they get a lot of attention from our elected officials because they know that those groups can help them in elections or hurt them in elections.
Wow.
That's power.
Wow.
So as a group, folks need to exercise that right. I understand why we don't. I understand historically, not only here, but in other places, we've been sold promises over the years. And those promises have not been fulfilled. And people have felt after a while, well, my vote doesn't matter. Even when you look at what happened with Judge Hunter, people feel like, well, my vote doesn't matter because somebody else has just come. Well, actually, your vote does matter. And people are, in fact, trying to listen to what you have to say. But if you don't show up, they can't hear you.
Sure.
I understand why people are disenchanted with the vote. But I also understand and I see that the people who are elected have such an incredible impact on our daily lives.
Absolutely.
That we cannot simply ignore it and say, well,
absolutely.
I used to ask people, they say, why should I vote? You know, and they say, yeah, and I say, let me ask you something. First of all, as a judge, I have a great reputation as a judge. And I'm willing to bet you, if you come and sit in my courtroom, that you would say, I would prefer Fanon Rucker be here in this seat than somebody else.
Sure.
That's the first reason that you vote. Second reason, when it comes to the court, we see a lot of things that happen on TV with criminal cases and with civil rights cases and with police misconduct cases. And we all got commentary about it. We all talk about it around our tables and with our friends in the barbershops. That doesn't mean anything if we don't put ourselves in a position where we actually can sit in the jury box and make a decision that actually has some legally binding effect. And the only way you can sit in the jury box is if you're a registered voter.
Yes, true.
That's the only way.
That's very true.
So come off the sidelines by talking about something, register to vote, and then actually be engaged and make decisions so that you don't have to guess at what would have happened if somebody had been there who actually could have done something right.
Certainly. You talked about that people in elected offices have an effect on us every day. Let's talk about the prosecutor's office.
Yeah.
Let's expound on some of the things that it does cover.
Sure.
And why it's important. Now, I'm very clear to understand you are not running for just black people.
That's
You're
right.
running for Hamilton County,
Hamilton County,
judge
right.
excuse me, prosecutor of Hamilton
right.
County.
Yep.
And why it's important to have diversity
Oh, good.
in any major office dealing with diversity when it comes to the folks that they're serving. So let's talk about the prosecutor's office.
So the prosecutor's office is the chief law enforcement officer of really the region, but certainly for the county. This is the office that decides the policies of what types of charges will and will not be pursued. It's the office that decides how the law enforcement officers are going to come to them with charges, how the grand jury process, whether people get charged and whether or not people go to treatment, but by recommendation from them, or whether they're actually going, be recommending them for jail. Some of the biggest issues that we're looking at around the country right now have to do with bail bond reform. What we know currently in Hamilton County is that 65 to 70% of the people in that jail right now are there and have not yet been convicted of any offenses.
Wow.
65 to 70% of the people in the Justice Center are there because they cannot afford to get out.
Wow.
The purpose of bail is not to keep people locked up. The purpose is to make sure they come back.
Come back for court.
For the court.
Yeah.
And by the judge has the ultimate decision of what the bail is, but the prosecutor is a very persuasive voice in the recommendation. And so if by policy, the office says from now on, we're going to recommend an only recognizance bond for nonviolent offenses, nonviolent felonies, misdemeanors, then that be the way that the judges would also go, because they wouldn't necessarily go against the prosecutor, and the information about the case is coming from the prosecutor's office. Another very, I don't know about simple, but one of the issues that we see across the country is the number of people who are being released from jail, being exonerated for wrongful convictions or for questionable convictions. We see it all the time. Just last month, 3 individuals were let out of prison after 36 years because they were wrongfully convicted. And how did they do that? Well, they contacted the prosecutor. Her name is Marilyn Mosby, and she is incredible. Baltimore prosecutor. I think Marilyn is under 40 years old. And she set up a conviction integrity unit. There's about 30 of them around the country, modeled after a federal program in Far East. And these conviction integrity units actually go through controversial court cases. And they go through the transcripts, and they look at the officers who were involved in them, and they look at questionable evidence to decide whether the conviction actually was legitimate.
Sure.
And there have been people like these 3 individuals who've been 36 years in prison for something they absolutely did not do.
Wow.
So they sent a letter to her and said, you have a conviction integrity unit. This is a long shot. Would you happen to take a look at this? She said, well, of course I will. And they did. And she determined, and the courts agreed, these people should not be in jail.
Wow.
That's huge. Our office does not have that. We don't have a sentencing integrity unit. We don't have a conviction integrity unit, but we will if and when I'm elected prosecutor. And we talk about diversity. The Supreme Court of Ohio says, look, we can have a justice system that actually is just and adheres to the principles, but it needs to and should reflect a bit more of the community that's impacted by its policies. We have a prosecutor's office that has about 133 lawyers,
Wow.
criminal and civil. There's about 120 other employees, support staff. Out of the 133 lawyers, and I know this personally, there's about a history of about 10 total of African Americans who have come through that office. 10. When I ran for county prosecutor in 2004, I was the first African American to ever run for the position. Since 1998, that office has not hired a single African American male.
Wow.
1998.
Wow.
But we talk about the system, and we talk about the demographic of those who are coming through the system. We talk about the fact that in juvenile court, 75 to 80% of those who are coming through there look like the folks who aren't
Wow.
represented there. We talk about in municipal court, 50 to 60% of those who come through municipal court are not reflected in a public office.
Wow.
How do public offices not reflect the community?
Exactly. That elected them. Continue talking about that. I have another guest when you talked about another juvenile court. I'm going to ask him to mic her up so she can just come on the set. But I wanted to basically let you continue while they're preparing her to come onto the set because I know I want to definitely make sure she's mic'd up because this is history as well with her running for this position as well. So please continue while they continue to prepare our guest. The point.
So what people are looking at when it comes to prosecutors' offices is they are trying to have people put in places and policy places who have a history of a concern for justice,
Sure.
not politics.
Sure.
And when we look at the prosecutor's office, we cannot have it focused on politics. It has to be about the people.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
cannot have it based on party. It
Wow.
has to be about the people.
Wow.
We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, do hereby establish justice.
Yes.
That core principle of justice is supposed to be what our justice system is about.
Sure.
So in Baltimore and in Philadelphia and in Northern Virginia this past election and in San Francisco and in Missouri, the people are electing to prosecutor positions.
Sure.
People whose history shows that they're interested in a just system.
Wow.
Whatever that means. Now, I personally believe that in order to achieve a just system, we have to include the voices of all who are impacted.
Certainly.
So you got to have law enforcement part of that conversation. You have to have returning citizens part of that conversation. You have to have social justice warriors involved in that conversation. You have to have a community involved in that
Wow.
conversation.
Wow. Wow.
That's how we achieve justice,
Wow.
by including all the voices, we together.
Wow.
Not
Wow.
a single individual deciding what is or is not.
Wow. March the
17.
17th
Yeah.
is when we get an opportunity to go out and make a recommendation. We'd like to see you as Hamilton County Prosecutor. Give your name one more time, and then I'm going to have you come back
Cool.
once I get finished talking to Mrs. Smith.
Okay.
And we're just going to talk for the last 5 minutes about the whole Hamilton County system itself. One more time, Mr. Rucker. Give them.
I am retired judge Fanon Rucker, and I am a candidate for Hamilton County Prosecutor, March 17th.
Wow, how awesome.
FanonRucker.com, FanonRucker.com, FanonRucker.com.
What's they can what now?
FanonRucker.com, FanonRucker.com.
It has a nice little ring to it. Fanon Rucker, Fanon Rucker, Fanon Rucker. Sound like a stuck record.
That's right.
That's a good thing. All right, Mr. Rucker, man, such a pleasure. Please stand by. We'll bring you back on after we talk to Mrs. Smith.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody, there you heard Mr. Fanon Rucker, who's running for Hamilton County Prosecutor. Again, we tried to get all of our particular candidates to come on to the program so you can get information. I hope you enjoyed that. To be able to learn something about the gentleman and what he stands for in that position, it's important for us to know the character of our individuals. So thank you so much for doing that. We have another guest that's coming on. That is, she's going to be running for judge, juvenile judge, in the city of Cincinnati. A lot of you were familiar with, I think it was Miss Tracy Hunter, who was a juvenile judge for many, many, many years. She's running in that same category as a juvenile judge, and we had the opportunity to secure her for today's program, of which we're very, very excited. I'll let her introduce herself and give her spiel, and says, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm running for a juvenile judge, just so that make sure that you get the correct spelling, and that's not spelling, but enunciation of her name. So we're going to go to my second guest, everybody, and welcome. She is running for the position in Hamilton County as well. I'm going to have her introduce herself and welcome her to our program. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the Let's Talk public?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Benefield. I'm Glenda A. Smith. I'm running for Hamilton County Juvenile Court Judge.
Wow, how awesome. Welcome, Glenda.
Thank you.
You know, I didn't want to just say Glenda, but I like it when it makes me feel kind of important. Hi, I'm Glenda A. Smith, and I'm running for juvenile court. I love it. Welcome to the program. How are you?
I am blessed. I'm blessed to be here. I'm blessed that God has chosen me for such a time as this.
Wow. How awesome. Absolutely. And now, it's long overdue. Wouldn't you agree?
I would,
Long
and I
overdue.
do.
And the exciting part about it is that what an awesome position to be in. Let's talk about some of the responsibilities of juvenile judge.
Sure. The juvenile court has two sides to it. It has the family side that is often overlooked, which is abuse, neglect, and dependency. That side has the ability to remove children from homes or require parents to do any number of things to maintain their family.
Sure.
And then there is the delinquency side. That side deals with crimes that children may commit. So we have those two sides of the court. And in my mind, the two go hand in hand.
Sure. So why Tell me, someone sitting in their living room and says, well, Ms. Smith is running for juvenile judge. Why should I make a decision? Tell us who you are. I happen to know who you are because I've seen you in the community. But for our viewers, tell them who you are and why should they vote for you and the different perspective that you would bring versus someone else running for the position.
Okay. Who I am. I am a person that was raised in public housing by a single parent.
Wow.
I was a teenage mother.
Wow.
My extended family helped my mother raise me.
Wow.
And it was very good. My uncles, my aunts helped raise me, my grandparents, both my grandmother and my grandfather.
Wow.
In turn, my first child, actually all of my children, my family has helped raise my children.
And that kind of went back to what my previous guest, Mr. Rucker, was speaking of, how the influence of the people that were in your nucleus is a major factor in getting you to where you are today. Because imagine, like you think about, young people having children, imagine how difficult it would have really been if there wasn't some kind of a support or assistance from the family or whoever was in your life to make a difference so that you could make it to where you are today.
Absolutely. I had my church.
Wow.
I had a teacher at my high school who saw the potential in me. I had a vice principal at my high school who saw the potential in me. And although I would miss school frequently because I had to work because I was a single parent, although I lived in my mother's house, I still had a child. I was a teen parent. Certainly. But I still had to work at a very early age.
Certainly.
Again, my extended family. And I think that is what's missing today. And I think it's very important with my children. I have my neighbors. I have my extended family. I have my church, whom I love, who has helped me raise my children. And I have 4 children. I'm very proud of them. The first one, my first child, has a master's in social work. She works for Veterans Hospital as a licensed therapist for veterans. She's been there many years. My second child, my son, is a journeyman electrician.
Wow.
And he works for Miller's, and he has a real estate holdings business as well.
Wow.
My third child.
When you get older, they're going to take care of mama, right?
Oh, they do that now, actually. They're very good to me.
I'm sorry, please continue.
Yeah, that's true. They're very good to me. And my third child just graduated from Wellesley College last month. She graduated a semester early. And my fourth child is graduating from Wyoming High School this May and has been accepted to every college that she's applied to.
How awesome.
And I'm very excited that she's graduating because juvenile court has to be your first, second, and third priority. You have to, this is going to take up a tremendous amount of time. There's a tremendous amount of reform that I would like to see take place in the court. So that's who I am. I have a master's in public affairs, a doctorate in jurisprudence from Indiana University. I started out as a federal litigator with the Attorney General's office, and then that evolved, and I began to be, I was a guardian ad litem, representing abused children.
Wow.
For the Hamilton County Public Defender's Office. I did that for 2 years. I got a little frustrated with the system, and so then I started representing children and families in my own practice.
Wow.
Then that evolved here of late. In recent years, I've been a civil rights attorney.
Wow.
Representing children and families in federal court.
Wow.
So, God has shown me that to get the change that that needs to take place, that there needs to be a change in leadership. And so I have prayed. God called me 3 years ago. Well, first, I had a conversation with God. I was like, God, why don't you do something about this? And basically, and I was walking around Winton Woods Lake, and he said, why don't you? He did. He said, why don't you? So I immediately thought that he meant for me to represent people in federal court because of due process violations, excessive force violations. And so I said, God, bring me the cases. And he did.
Wow.
And then, God said, okay, you see, there has to be a change of leadership.
Sure.
You need to run for judge.
Especially after experiencing what you experienced.
Exactly.
On a first-hand basis.
And so I said, okay, I'll step up to that plate, because to whom much is given, much is required.
Sure. Well, you mentioned that you feel that some changes would come, that need to take place. As an elected judge in Hamilton County, let's talk about some of the things that you would change being a judge.
Okay. There is an initiative called Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiatives.
Okay.
That has been around for 25 years. It's in 300 counties across the United States.
Okay.
It's in 13 counties in Ohio. It started in Ohio in 2010. And it started with the 5 largest counties, but for Hamilton County, which is the 3rd largest county in the state. So it started in 2010 with Franklin County, Cuyahoga County, Montgomery County, Summit, and Lucas. And in Montgomery County, in just 6 years after implementing Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiatives, better known as JDAI, the detention rate was reduced by 70%.
Wow.
Juvenile detention was reduced by 70%. It also reduces juvenile arrests, juvenile violence is reduced, racial and ethnic disparities is reduced, because we know we have that's very serious in the juvenile court, the disparity that we have. And it reduces racial profiling in policing. I have talked to both Judge Capizzi, who is the juvenile court judge in Montgomery County, and I have talked to the Director Gies of the Ohio Department of Youth Services. They have had nothing but good things to say about this initiative, Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiatives. I want to bring it here. These are our children, and our children are our future. And if we can do something to help the distress that our children and our families and our community is in, we need to do that. So that's one of the things I would like to do on the juvenile side.
Certainly. One of the things I was impressed upon meeting you, and I guess it's from a male perspective, is that you are female, and you just mentioned that you have children. And with it being juvenile, dealing with children, being a female, don't you believe that would be a benefit?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm saying that because sometimes traditionally there have been male judges, you know, and I know statistically men have a different perspective with kids versus females, and I certainly do applaud women with the patience and all those good things that help to develop the kids. So I mean, let's talk about that, because I know you're here to get people to just find out who you are. As a female, what are some of the things that you feel, and I know all the politics, I know all the legal things, but the bottom line, I do believe it comes down to the character of the individual that's supported by the laws and governing and operating in the laws to make a difference in the people that they serve. But as a female, what different perspective do you think you can bring to the judge position?
One perspective that I would bring is not to violate due process rights. And one of the things is that to give parents notice of hearings that occur, and that notice needs to come from juvenile court, not children's services. Another thing that I would like to see occur is that hearsay not be allowed when looking at temporarily terminating a parent's rights.
Wow.
Because even in criminal court, hearsay is generally not allowed, yet it is allowed pervasively in juvenile court.
Wow.
When we know from the Supreme Court of the United States and the Sixth Circuit Court that parental rights are held in high esteem, and the courts have said people have a right to raise their children the way they see fit. So I think that at times institutions have a tendency to place middle class values on persons who cannot grasp those values because they're in a different situation. And let me give you a case in point.
Yes, please do.
When I was going to law school, I was in the master's program and the JD program at the same time. There were times I took my children to school with me, and I placed them in the library until I got out of class.
Sure.
I never had a problem at IU doing that. I got a call from a child I represented 15 years ago. She's kept in touch with me. And this was, well, that's another case altogether, but she called me recently and she said that her children were at the library. She had been at work.
Sure.
She had a babysitter, and that her children were picked up, and now she was involved with children's services. And I said, oh, you know, I just felt so bad about that because I didn't understand why there would need to be juvenile court intervention at that point. And I'm not saying that juvenile court initiated. I don't even know
Certainly.
why children's services would initiate a complaint
Certainly.
of that nature. And I don't know all the facts.
Certainly.
But it was just it just brought me back to when I did the same thing.
Exactly. And because of the diversity that you would bring to the court, seeing it from a multitude of perspectives when it comes to different children, because we clearly understand that different cultures raise their kids different. And to be open rather than just one blank, prescription, it's just A, B, C. In some places is AQR.
Correct.
As long as the end result is still good, that appears to me as something good that would come because you talked about diversity, the lack of some diversity issues or different perspectives in diversity in the juvenile court. That I'm assuming you're saying you'd bring that.
Oh, absolutely. I bring with me my life experiences. For example, as a child, I oftentimes, at age 7, got myself off to school and back home from school. I don't think, for me, that is not something that an agency needs to intervene in.
Sure.
I'm glad that nobody took me out of the home and said I was neglected. Because I had to get myself off to school at age 7 and get myself back home at age 7.
Sure.
So absolutely, I'm going to come with it from a different perspective. I'm going to bring in the fact that I was raised in public housing. I was a single parent, a teenage parent.
Sure.
I've been a single parent.
Sure.
So all of those experiences I've had, I can identify with.
I want you to continue talking, but I'm going to ask Fernando to just pull up a chair and just come on back in. I hope you still have his mic over there. Pull up a chair, just come in and sit with us to continue the conversation. Miss Calhoun, you can come on the set as well. So, that is such an important part because when I'm reminded that I'm old enough that when I was younger, we didn't have daycare. There was an older couple that lived on the first floor named Mrs. Payton. And when we got out of school, we had to come directly home. We lived in the 3rd floor in the West End. And Miss Payton knew we had better not leave that 3rd floor And the interesting part, if we tried to tip downstairs, she would open doors, you better get back upstairs. But the bottom line is we were never reported to social service because mom was working, dad was working, and I'm assuming that they were, the wages that most folks in my community would get were of such that it wasn't a major that they could afford to have hundreds and thousands of dollars to go towards daycare, I'm assuming. But we were never in danger because the neighbor was the one that we were in our own space. And I'm hearing today because people didn't grow up where they could afford to have a daycare of whatever. If the kid is ever like an older kid that may be 12 years old watching their brother who is like 9 years old and mother said, and they're calling child social services, taking the kids from the family. So to have a different perspective to say, well, maybe this is not a case where this woman is a bad or father or they're bad parents. But I hope I'm doing a good job of explaining the different circumstances that have to be taken into consideration before you separate the family and put the kids in foster care, charging the parents with neglect and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, they're doing the best that they can. And please welcome back to the table, Mr. Rucker. And you can join in on this conversation as well. The perspective that you bring possibly has been in that situation, and you understand what a parent is actually going through if they come in front of you where the social service has brought them, charging them with neglected children.
Let me give you a statistic. If you look at the Hamilton County Juvenile Court report in 2018, which talks about 2017 statistics, complaints against families went up 90%.
Wow. And we would assume, and it is a great, the prosecutor who would probably be the person to bring some of those charges. And you can jump in on this, Mr. Rucker. Why is it important to have people with an open mind, not necessarily a different mind because the law is the law, but an open mind in processing these things where it is in the best interest of, I want to say the people, when you're making decisions, if someone's working and blah, 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 maybe current office is saying, we're going to put this case on, we're going to prosecute him for that, and someone says, no, well, let's investigate this a little further rather than just a number. Am I speaking? I want you guys to kind of jump in because I certainly don't want to continue to speak, please.
Well, particularly when it comes to juvenile justice, understand there's a different goal than there is for adult justice.
Sure.
For adult justice, it's supposed to be punishment and rehabilitation.
Sure.
For juvenile justice, if I'm correct, the primary focus is supposed to be rehabilitation and correction. So that it should not be an intention to treat the student or the child in the same way that we treat the adults, because it can have a detrimental long-term impact on their life, their potential,
sure,
their ability to climb out of the situation they may be in, depending on how hard of a hammer the juvenile court laws are imposed on them. And so that discretion that the prosecutor has about what and how to bring the charges and what the long-term impact is an important consideration.
Certainly. Well, but and even when you talk about punishment, process as the position you're running for, you make a decision as to what they're charged with. Am I correct?
That would be correct.
And assign someone to prosecute them to get them, the prosecutor to get them convicted of it. So having a different experience in your life would certainly have a profound effect over how people are treated versus where they're not treated that way today.
I think that's right.
Okay. Did you want to expand? Because I kind of heard you say that, and I'm hearing her as well, because I want people to understand why it's important to have diversity. Because I may like fried chicken, but I've never had curry chicken. If you're from India, well, look at what I've missed out on from having the opportunity. But I know someone from India, and now, talk.
Well, what we know about diversity is that the advantage of diversity is perspectives.
Yes.
And we know that we have a community that in itself is contained many different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And so when we have an office that is not as familiar with or immersed in the different perspectives, then there's going to be a singular way that they deal with the folks who come from different areas or different backgrounds or different thoughts or different experiences. So it's important that there be diversity in experience, not necessarily just race,
Sure.
but diversity of experiences and thought and ideology in the people who are setting these policies.
Exactly. And that's what I was explaining about Ms. Smith. We know traditionally as men, females or women have great rapport with kids. Most of them have rapport with kids. I know that, as a dad, it would be not as patient, and that's important when it comes to dealing with youth. We know we're the implementers of structure and order and stuff like that. So when you're looking for that, it's important to have a male to have that kind of input, and to bring what you bring and what she brings to Hamilton County is a plus. With all the credentials that you have, as qualified as everyone else, but some of the folks don't have the different input and diversity that you have to bring to these different positions.
That is correct. Again, I've raised 4 children.
Sure.
So I have that experience, and I would like to believe that they're successful, and I look at their success not just what they're doing professionally,
Sure.
but what they're doing spiritually. They're genuinely good people. And so, and having raised them as a single parent, the first 2, because my first husband was deceased when my second child was 3.
Sure.
And then I was married again, and so I've raised children as a single parent and being married as well. So, as well as my upbringing, I know it takes a village to raise a child, no matter what your economic status is. And
Absolutely.
if we have to help you find that village, that's fine. Case in point, I had started a youth Bible study in Bond Hill in 2009 and had it for 8 years until May of 2017 at a Me school. In May of 2017, a new principal came in and decided that it was not something she wanted to do. But that Bible study met every Saturday night for 2 hours a night, every Sunday night for 2 hours a night. And we brought in volunteers. We fed the kids a full course home cooked meal. We had praise and worship, a half hour of that, half hour mealtime, half hour of study time within their age group from K to 18, and a half hour rec time. Well, in 9 years, we established a relationship with these children.
Awesome.
And they shared things with us that they wouldn't ordinarily share.
And what a different approach.
Exactly. And it's been and what I learned is that sometimes some of their parents cannot provide.
Talk about the things that